So welcome everybody. I'm so glad you're here today. Claire Law, a certified educational planner, is the author of How to Control Your College Costs, coming out soon on Kindle app. Claire has over 20 years experience with many facets of college, working first in admissions and financial aid, then working for a Sallie Mae lender, and then going into private practice as an educational consultant. She teaches a course in navigating the financial aid network at the University of California, Irvine, where I took her class while pursuing my IEC certificate. Claire has a long commitment to helping students find colleges that fit them not only academically, socially, and emotionally, but financially as well.
Right. And so do you, Karen. You have a commitment to finding the right college fit for your families, and you also are concerned about costs and containing costs and making that match the emotional, social, developmental, and financial fit. So I'd send my students to you any day because you do spend all that time and love and attention on them.
Thanks, Claire. What motivated you to go into private practice?
Well, I went into private practice after working in college admissions and for a Sallie Mae lender, AMS Education Loan Trust. And I learned a lot when I was calling on financial aid directors to try to get them to take the Stafford Parent Plus and alternative loans from my company. I learned that institutional interest is not the same as student interest. Financial aid administrators are responsible for a budget, for bringing in enough revenue to meet budget. And so everyone on college is really involved in recruiting, from professors to admissions staff to students who are calling other students from the admissions office. It's a machine that's well oiled. Plus, they have enrollment managers that make sure that students get recruited with, a lot of regression analysis and probability and statistics embedded in, so that I felt that families were just unaware of this machinery that's going on, and that just as colleges protect their own interest and try to do the best they can for students, but they first and foremost are looking after the interest of the university, so do families need to look after their own financial interest.
Thanks. In your upcoming book, you talk about finding your AFC. People know what EFC is, the frightening expected family contribution, which is changing its terminology to student aid index. I like that you ask your families early on to consider their AFC, what their affordable family contribution is. Do you want to talk about that shortly?
Sure. The EFC, the expected family contribution, which is now changing to student aid index, is a methodology for the college to determine how much federal aid students are eligible to receive. Federal aid, as you know, doesn't cover the cost of college because college costs have increased way beyond even medical costs over the years. So however, the colleges award federal aid first. They want to see how much federal aid students are eligible to receive. And so if we have, let's face it, if people only had to pay the federal expected contribution, more people would go to college because more people could afford it. But that's not the case. And so what I am saying is, regardless of whether the expected contribution is called student aid index or something else, families have to find their own affordable family contribution so that they can take control of their college costs. And that's what the book is about.
Thanks, Claire. I love your emphasis on affordability from the start. In today's webinar, however, we're going to focus on the latter part of the process. Students are getting their acceptance letters, and now parents are looking at how they will pay for college. You told me a story about an older friend who thought kids should put themselves through college the way she did, without financial aid.
Yes, I have a dear old friend. She is a professor of anthropology. She worked in Illinois, University of Illinois, Urbana. In the 60s is when she went to college. And she was from a poor family and worked in summers, waited tables during the school year, took a semester off to pay. And she's saying she put herself through college. And why can't today's kids do it? And then she set up several scholarships for students, thinking that then they wouldn't have to take loans. So I set her straight on that. Basically, there is no way that students can pay for college nowadays. Well, if they're fully Pell eligible, they may be able to pay the tuition at community college. But that's not the same as going to a four-year college and enjoying the full on-campus experience, which costs at least 20 to 30,000 at your in-state public institution, 40 to 50,000 or more at an out-of-state public institution. And then you have the private colleges that cost from $60,000 to $83,000. Yeah, we've broken the $80,000 mark. Brown University already charged 82,000 something. So very quickly, you'll see that federal aid can't pay for such high costs. And so what I tell families is to look at their current income, do their budget, look at their assets, whatever they've saved for college, how much can they afford to borrow? And that is what they can afford to do. That's what they're capable, that's what they're able to borrow to pay for college. And they're also willing to borrow that amount to pay for college. But they have a better handle on costs if they do their own budget and figure out what is truly affordable to them. And so I call that the affordable family contribution.
And I also like that you make sure they understand that that's for 4 years, that they're going to be paying for a minimum of 4 years, perhaps 5 or 6.
Well,
So,
if colleges made it
I really
easier
like
for
that.
students to graduate in 3 years, then, it would be cheaper. I certainly make sure that the students who work with, we make sure that the students who work with us find a good fit and they graduate in 4 years or less, especially if they have AP classes, advanced credit, dual credits, and so on.
You've said that going to college today is synonymous with taking out loans, and I want to cover loans for most of our time today. But first, I want to talk about some basic questions that I had from actual questions from actual parents about FAFSA and the CSS profile. So the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA. What's the difference between the FAFSA and the CSS profile?
Okay.
And why do some schools ask for the profile in addition to the FAFSA?
Right. So the FAFSA is a federal form that evaluates families' eligibility for federal financial aid. Federal financial aid is legislated under Title IV of the Higher Education Act as amended. So the first thing that colleges will do when a student files a FAFSA is to look and see if they're eligible for federal aid. It's not institutional money, it's money that doesn't come out of the institution. They're more than happy to give it to the student if the student qualifies. And of course, the financial aid administrators have to adhere to federal laws before they give out federal aid. One moniker that rings true to me is that FAFSA is good at determining who is poor because it's very much of a Pell qualifier. So they don't ask many more questions because if a student is poor, they don't bother with assessing assets. If they have a 0 EFC, it's pretty clear they qualify for a full Pell Grant, which this year is up to $6,430. And they don't ask many more questions. Now, the CSS profile is a form that about 400 colleges use, and they're mostly private colleges. Although the College Board is trying to reel in more public flagships like UNC Chapel Hill, UVM, UVA, and so on. But that's just a handful. So the CSS profile is supposed to look at a family more carefully. So there are many more data points that the CSS profile looks for. And so the CSS profile essentially looks at who is rich and how much can they really pay on their own. Many CSS profile schools will say, we fill 100% of demonstrated need, but only after they've combed through every last little bit of financial stuff that you may have, that you may have even forgotten about. So FAFSA is a Pell qualifier, can establish eligibility for federal financial aid very quickly. The CSS profile is used by colleges that want to make sure that if they give out institutional aid, that the family truly is eligible for it. So it's a form for figuring out how rich the families truly are. I hope that explains it.
Oh, it's very good. I felt it was very invasive as a divorced, remarried parent. When we were going through the CSS profile, they wanted everybody's information, including my ex, who was not very cooperative. So it does feel very invasive, but fortunately, as you said, only about 400 schools use it.
Right.
Why does every college? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that the unfortunate thing is if your child, if a student applies to a strongly adhering CSS profile school, conceivably they may collecting for financial information from 4 parties if they're divorced. So the biological parents, whether they're married or not, both financial information is collected, and then the divorced parents. So in my case, it would be myself and my husband and his ex and his spouse and the spouse. So that hits pretty hard if they consider 4 families. And I would say that's a case for appealing. I would appeal.
Why does every college want the FAFSA filled out, and why does it have to be filled out every year?
The FAFSA has to be filled out every year because financial situations change. You could win the lottery this year and not need any financial aid. But I think the case is more likely that the family is unemployed and no longer earns the income that was listed on the FAFSA. Remember, the FAFSA requires the prior year. So that's income that someone was earning 18 months ago. And we know that with COVID-19, many people have lost their employment and things have changed. So the college requires a FAFSA every year.
I'm sure financial aid offices are dealing with a lot of appeals right now because so many people's finances have changed. And that's what you do. You go to the college's financial aid office if you need to appeal.
Right,
what are the deadlines for applying for
strategies.
financial?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, we talked. What are the deadlines for applying for financial aid?
All right, colleges establish their own deadlines, especially if they're CSS profile colleges, because if you pass that deadline, they can easily say, oh, we ran out of aid, we've awarded all our aid. So it's best to adhere to the college deadlines for CSS profile and FAFSA. So both FAFSA and CSS profile open the season on October 1st. And the FAFSA is actually open until June 30th. In other words, the federal government's central processing unit is open to process FAFSAs until June 30th of the following year. But as you know, colleges want to see that FAFSA as early as possible. So you want to file as early as possible, and you want to file as early as possible and follow through with making sure that your FAFSA is received by the college.
Here's a question I've received from a number of people.
Mm-hmm.
Does applying for financial aid hurt the student's chances of being admitted? Should we play around with saying, no, we don't really need financial aid?
Or let's not say that we need financial aid. Let's just say that we don't need it. And then after he's admitted, we'll say that, yeah, we do need financial aid. Yeah, it's really, you just want to be as honest and truthful as you can. If you need financial aid, go ahead and on the common application, click financial aid. The truth is that some families know that their expected contribution is so high, like over $100,000, that they will not get any need-based aid. But if they want to borrow unsubsidized loans from the federal government, then they file the FAFSA. So when you're talking about, let's see.
I just wanted to mention while you're checking that,
Yeah,
you're better off borrowing the student or parent financial aid from the government because the interest rates are so low right now and paused.
yeah,
So the short answer is, does applying, the short answer is it doesn't hurt you there are certain cases where they are need aware, but if you're going to need financial aid, don't try to get around that fact.
Right. So it does not, it's such a big question, you know, it goes into so many tangents. If the policy of the college is to meet 100% of demonstrated need, it's good to file as early as possible. But when colleges say we're need blind, it doesn't mean anything if they don't meet your demonstrated financial need. So for example,
Correct.
There are many well-known colleges in this country we've all heard of, and they essentially fill demonstrated need with a plus loan for parents. And some of these cases you read about in the press, in newspapers. And so some colleges are now saying, yes, you're acceptable, but you can't possibly afford our school. We can't meet 100% of your need. So it's admit, deny. You are not coming to this college. So the colleges that promise to meet 100% of a student's demonstrated need are very selective. They're the Amherst, Williams, all of the Ivies, which typically get high performing students. Columbia University. So if a student needs financial aid, a student should say so, and a student should also plan on having the right college list, and that's why you work with us. Right, Karen? Because we would put some colleges on that list that they can afford.
Yes. Exactly. Let's discuss the types of federal student aid available. One of the basics in the class you teach. Grants, work study, and loans. Loans are the more complicated portion. Grants and talk about work study. So when we talk about grants, we're talking about what? And probably most of the people we work with would not qualify for the Pell Grant. Go ahead and talk about the.
Typically no, but we may have a pro bono student who has a 0 EFC, and you'll know if the student has a 0 EFC because they're on free or reduced lunch, their parents get Social Security or TANF, temporary assistance to needy families. or WIC, which is food for women and infants. So you would know that the student is eligible for Pell, probably the subsidized loan, and federal work study. When the expected family contribution gets up into, is between, let's say, 7,000 on up, that family has phased out of federal work, of federal grants, whether it be Pell or SEOG, the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. So then you're looking at loans, and undergraduate students can borrow limited amounts of loans. So in first year, they can borrow $5,500. In second year, they can borrow $6,500. And in third and fourth year, they can borrow $7,500 each. So by the time they graduate, if they take all those loans, they have about $27,000 worth of student loans, plus the interest, plus the student loan fees, because there are origination fees. So for example, this year it's 1 point something or other. So if the college disburses $5,500 to a college, then $55 is the origination and disbursement fee. So the college actually gets less than $5,500. And I'm glad that some
on my end, hoping you guys
Sorry?
can still hear.
Yeah.
My
So
computer froze.
right.
I wanted to get into work study and then loans. So let's talk about what it means before we go into the loan limits and all that. Let's talk about the work study and what it means to be awarded work study.
Okay. So if the student demonstrates need, and if the college has work study programs, because some colleges put it on the financial aid award, but they don't have enough jobs that are designated as work study jobs. And this is different than a work study, which is a job the student goes and gets off campus, on campus. This is not related to federal money, but federal work study, WFS, is a program where the government gives the college money to provide work study opportunities for students. And this could be working in the library, helping out in the cafeteria, or cleaning the dining hall, or whatever. But it gives students money while they're on campus. And few students actually take that paycheck and go to the bursar's office and pay tuition with it. Because as you know, the cost of attendance, however high it is, doesn't cover everything. Again. You know, students still need some pocket money. But
I just wanted to point out that you can't count on that federal work study money, even if it's on your award. You can't count on it, especially athletes I know have had trouble getting hours from work study that matches their availability. So I always tell parents, yeah, you got that, but you got to work to find it, and it's not a guarantee. So let's talk about the reasoning behind the loan limits of $5,500 the first year, $6,500 the second year, and $7,500 the third and fourth years. A parent asked me why the amount was so low. She thought perhaps they made too much money. You want to explain that?
Nothing to do with that. These are loans given directly to the student by the government. So students have to take some ownership of this and have to understand that they're entering into a financial transaction with the government. Now, no bank, trust, or regional authority would lend this amount to a 17 or an 18 or a 19-year-old who has no credit. So the fact that these loans are backed by the full faith of and guarantee of the federal government means that even if the student defaults, the college still has the amount. It's an opportunity for students to build credit, learn about fiscal responsibility, and studies show that if they graduate or get their certificate, they are able to pay these loans back. So this amount has been established for a long time, and students are able to pay their loans back if they graduate.
So I'm just going to sum up what we've said so far. Cost of college is so high that loans are pretty much inevitable. Federal loans are available to all dependent students, and for the most part, a student going from high school to college is going to be a dependent student. Most of us are, unless you're working with a graduate student, you're most likely to be working with a dependent student, and it's not worth gaming the system with that thing either. The loan amounts are $5,500, $6,500, $7,500, $7,500. Now, what we didn't talk about is the difference between the subsidized and the unsubsidized loan.
Okay.
So can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. If the student qualifies for subsidized loans, it means that there is a demonstrated need. And the higher the cost of college, the more likely that there is a demonstrated need. In fact, there is a ton of demonstrated need out there that doesn't get filled by colleges except with loans. So if the student is Pell eligible, or the student is going to a school that costs a lot, there's definitely going to be need. So the loan amount, a portion of the $5,500 in first year can be subsidized, which means that the federal government is paying interest on the loan while the student is in school. And the limits are $3,500 can be subsidized in first year, $4,500 in second year, and $5,500 in third and fourth year. So the student with need would be responsible to pay interest on the extra $2,000 or $8,000 at the end of 4 years. And the student could pay the interest on that. The student could even pay the principal if they can. But those are loans for undergraduate dependent students. So the dependency status is established right away. As soon as a student applies, the financial aid administrator determines whether the student is dependent or independent. And the independent students already have a degree, they're 24 years or older, have served in the military and do not honorable discharged. They're orphans or wards of the court. Usually the students that we work with are dependent and can take out those amounts of loans that we just talked about.
So even if you don't demonstrate need, you are offered these relatively small unsubsidized loans. It just means that the interest is accruing while the student is in school.
Yes.
Okay. So a parent asked me this: does a student start paying back the loan immediately in monthly installments during the time that they're in college, or do they wait till after graduation? When do the loans have to be repaid?
Student loans don't have to be repaid until the student graduates 4 years later, and there is even a 6 months grace period. But all the while, the interest is accruing. It's almost like you put students in college and you tell them, oh, don't worry about paying right now. You just go ahead and have a good time. Worry about scheduling classes after 11 o'clock in the morning. You don't have to worry about paying while you're in college. And so it puts the student into an unrealistic environment, because while they're in school, the interest on the unsubsidized loans continues to accrue. And so when they graduate, they owe closer to $30,000 because of the interest that's accruing. This is not the case for parent plus loans. Parent loans have to be paid after they're disbursed. And in some cases, you can defer the interest until after the student graduates. But I think that the effect of having parents pay their plus loan once it's disbursed has the effect of showing them that whether or not they can afford more plus loans. Because the reason why we have 48 million borrowers who collectively owe $1.6 trillion of student loans is because they have signed on the promissory note, which you only need to sign once for as long as the student is in school. And then they've kept taking all these loans, the interest is accrued, and there's a hefty balance to pay once the student graduates. So as concerned as I am for students who are taking out the undergraduate loans, I am more concerned about parents who have sent their kids to expensive schools and are facing retirement and still have parent loans that they have to pay every month.
Speaking of retirement, should you go into your retirement accounts to pay for your kids' college? I know your answer to this.
No, but I spoke with a lawyer in Louisiana, and it was really interesting. She said if you have a pension under ERISA, it's ERISA. ERISA is a provision that companies had, and some employees had pension in the ERISA plan. You can borrow from it and then pay it back over time. And if you're interested in that, it doesn't happen very often, but this lawyer gave a wonderful presentation about how she wished that her mother had cashed in her pension under ERISA, and she had borrowed from her mother so that she would be paying her mother back with interest and fees. It's an exception. It doesn't happen very often. Most people have a 401k or an IRA, and you can borrow for 60 days, but then you have to put the money back in. Otherwise, you pay the 10% penalty.
The federal loans seem to be the big way to go, at least in the beginning. And I like that you suggest that students for the unsubsidized parts where the interest is accruing, that they pay off the interest a little bit each year. You said it could be maybe $60. That way it's not adding to the bottom line and increasing the amount of the loan. And I also like that you emphasize, you said that you've had parents take out the student loan for the student, not let the student even know they were taking it out for them. And you had some very good reasons. You mentioned some of them already, but would you just tick off those reasons again for why you think it's a good idea for the student to be the one signing and taking out the federal?
Yeah, I think it's a
direct
huge
loans.
disservice. It's when our students could really learn that they have a responsibility, that parents are willing to help, but students have to carry their share of that they have to be invested in their own education. They have to have some skin in the game because they are taking out these loans. They are in their name. And if anything happens, it's their credit that gets ruined. And also, student loans are not dischargeable, even in bankruptcy. Whoever figured that out, our friend Sally Mae, it's not a friend. Sally's not a friend. But anyway, these loans now are not dischargeable, so they'll follow the borrower mercilessly. And for students to know that higher education is a privilege, it has a cost, it's an opportunity cost, and they have to be involved in it. You can only do a disservice if you don't tell them about it.
Thank you. we already established that it's possible to ask for more financial aid, especially if the student's circumstances have changed. You go to the college directly to do that, to the financial aid office. I'd like to, oh, here's a question. If a student gets an acceptance letter from admissions but no financial award information, what should they do?
Well, if a student has filed the FAFSA, the financial aid award will follow. The student can call the financial aid department and say, hey, I'd really like to hear from you. The financial aid department will think, oh, this student is really interesting. Let's hurry up. Let's give him a financial aid package.
Right.
If a student sends a FAFSA to a college and doesn't apply for admission, that FAFSA will just be ignored. But if a student applies for admission, then it triggers a search for the FAFSA, and eventually the financial aid administrators will issue an award.
I just got a question from Michelle. So I want you to clarify this. She said, did Claire say that parent loans are still in the student's name? So if the parent doesn't pay on time, the student's credit is affected? No,
not at all.
For us, Claire.
The PLUS loans, PLUS, stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. That is the parent's own debt, which has a higher interest rate, 4 points origination fee, which, as bad as they sound, they're like a little bit of an insurance policy. So if the borrower passes on, the loan is forgiven. So there are two types of loans for students and loans for parents. Undergraduate students have aggregate limits of borrowing. They can't borrow a whole lot, and it may be enough for them to go to community college, actually. And then the lion's share of the costs fall on parents. And it's parents who are borrowing tens of thousands of dollars. And it's their responsibility to pay it back.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. I wanted to share with the group this, what used to be called the shopping sheet and is now called the college financing plan. Right. This is, let me do a share here. Here we go.
Right.
So this is available at studentaid.gov. This is
right.
The PDF. You just get a PDF when you go to studentaid.gov. I have taken all the information and put it into a Word document, and you can manually put in the numbers the same way.
That's a nice sheet, Karen. But essentially,
this is from the government. Yeah,
it's from the government. And what happens when colleges award financial aid is that there is this mixture of federal and institutional aid. So they might say, well, you're getting, can you put that back up?
I'm putting an annotated one up.
Okay, so they're saying,
there you go.
You're getting a little bit of federal aid, and then they mix it with a little bit of institutional aid, maybe a $1,500, chandelier scholarship or something. And it's very confusing. And so this annotated financial aid plan was designed very carefully by the Department of Education to show what is federal aid. So this is beautiful if colleges would only use it. So the cost of attendance is indicated in this column. And then it even has the expected family contribution. Now, very seldom will colleges tell you what your expected family contribution is. I think they should, because if the college costs this much, your expected family contribution is here. This is your expected family contribution. And they're telling you that you have to pay this much more. That means they're gapping the student. And sometimes this gap is very big and families borrow excessively. So it's nice that in this college financing plan, they have a place for the college to say, hey, we think that your federal expected contribution should be $20,000. Our cost is $60,000, your need is $40,000. Now, in those 40,000, you will see a 5,500 loan for the student, and then a plus loan for the parent to fill the gap, unless the college is giving some kind of discounts. Yeah, this is your wonderful sheet.
This is, now I like your spreadsheet, but this, and you're going to share that in a moment, but this is an example of an award. I have to say OWU and Goucher pretty much followed the suggested government shopping sheet. The intent of the government, as I understood it, was to get colleges to standardize their award letters a little bit, but they don't. So this was a way to, for my families to put in the numbers, take it from the award letter, put in the numbers, and you can see that this family's net award was, they got 3,500 in subsidized loans, which was the top you can get in subsidized, 2,000. This was their college net costs for a year at OWU. I'm going to ask you to share your spreadsheet. Do you have that handy, Claire?
Let's see.
I can pull it
I
up.
can.
If you
Let
don't.
me see if I can exit the full screen and go to one of my.
I'm going to stop sharing. So I'll explain. Claire shared with us when I was taking her class a spreadsheet that enables you to put in the numbers. You know, with my Word document, you have to get out a calculator. Let's see, can you send this to us as a, okay, hold on a second.
I pulled up the PowerPoint.
I'm reading all the things in the chat. Let's see, I'll try to make it bigger. I will send my both the PDF from the government and the Word document that I have. They're both on my website, but I'll send them to you directly, everybody who's in this webinar today. Let's see, calculator. Yeah. So I will send those.
I might have an award evaluation that I could share. Yeah.
Sure.
If you want, I can pull this up.
Sure. But I'll just, while you're looking, I'll tell you about the, tell everybody. So Claire had us put awards into a spreadsheet. And then of course, you know, in Excel, it'll do the addition and subtraction for you. It was a great exercise. I like using the separate Word documents myself, just because it's easy. I don't read Excel spreadsheets very well. It's too much information, but it is a nice way to just have everything laid out all at once for everything. Were you able to find it, Claire?
Give me permission to share?
You should have it.
Ask me to share.
How do I give you? Kelly Ricardo raised a hand. Can you maybe green button at top? Okay, green button at top. Did that. Okay, now we're getting into technology stuff that I don't know too well. I will definitely send everybody my resources and Claire's. Claire, I have the spreadsheet from oh, I make Claire the host of the meeting. Thank you, Vera. Okay, Claire, I'll make you the host, then you can share. All right, so here's, if I share that, this is what I did, I think, for your
okay, there
class.
It is. There it is.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. So let's see. what we're doing here with this sheet, this is just an example. Zoe, you have, I entered her personal ratings or SAT, ACT, etc. And I put the colleges that were on her list up here. She has Worcester, Goucher, Juniata, and Guilford. And she is an ENFP. For those of you who have read my book, Find the Perfect College for You, based on personality type, you would probably, it would probably resonate with you that I chose Worcester, Goucher, Juniata, and Guilford for an ENFP type, an extrovert, feeler, and perceiver. So here I put the cost of attendance of the college, and the total cost of attendance is 70,000 for Worcester, 65,000 for Goucher, 66 for Juniata, and 56 for
Claire,
Guilford. Yes.
hold on a second. You're not sharing, but you can now. I don't think they're seeing your screen, but I made you host, so now you can share. They were looking at my spreadsheet, which was different schools.
Here we go. Is everybody with us?
There we go.
Thank you for your patience.
Great.
Okay. So this is just an Excel spreadsheet that I created to kind of be able to analyze financial aid awards. So once you have the financial aid awards, you can enter them. First of all, you start with the cost of attendance, and you have to compare apples with apples. Some colleges allow more costs for books, others don't. But once you have the cost of attendance of the college, and then you can also increase the cost of transportation. For instance, here I put $500 only because the student lives in Maryland, whereas this is in Ohio, and this is North Carolina, so that even if the student drives to the college, it will drive the cost of attendance higher. Then I put the estimated family contribution, which we calculated. I can calculate it manually, or you can send your clients to the College Board Big Futures website. Your client just has to type in EFC calculator, and it'll bring up the College Board Big Futures calculator. And there they can enter their information in the privacy of their home, and they can figure out their federal EFC and their institutional EFC, which is usually higher because it considers the equity in the home and other things that bump up the ability to pay. And also under the institutional methodology, the students are obligated to contribute, and there is no personal income allowance as there is in the federal methodology. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but if you take the cost of attendance minus the expected contribution, which in this case is 26,382, so the family contribution is the same no matter where they go, but the cost of attendance is higher, so they have a need of roughly $40,000 at these private colleges, between $30,000 and $40,000. Now, if this student went to her in-state university, say Towson in Maryland, in Towson University, well, they don't have a demonstrated need, because with 26,382, they can probably go to that public university and not have any need. They can still get federal loans. They will get $5,500 in first year, which will be unsubsidized, because I don't think, because we're assuming that Towson doesn't cost more than their EFC. So then many colleges—
Can you scroll down, Claire, to show
I'm showing the financial need. I'm showing the EFC of the family, which remains the same So a family's ability to pay doesn't change because they go to a more expensive school. It's that the need is higher at the more expensive school.
So that line is what they have to pay. Financial need at this college is what they'll have to pay.
No, they'll have to
Given-
pay, they'll have to pay their EFC plus whatever the college doesn't fill. And most colleges fill demonstrated need with scholarships. So you can see that here, the student at College of Worcester is getting $33,000 worth of scholarship plus a need-based grant for 33,600. So that's how they're filling her need. They're acknowledging that she has need by giving her a grant for $600.
I'm looking for the bottom line.
Yeah, the bottom line, the net cost, after,
That's what
see,
I'm
this is the
looking for.
self-help portion. The student is getting $3,500 subsidized direct loan and $2,000 unsubsidized direct loan, and then federal work study. So this is all self-help, that $8,000. And then if you look at the unmet need is only 6%. So the family is paying the EFC plus the 6% of unmet need, which is $37,150.
So that's what they're going to have to pay.
Yeah, to go to that college.
That's what I was looking for
Yeah,
there.
which is pretty much the same. It's a little more at some of the others. And this is a couple of years old. But anyway,
yeah,
this gives you an opportunity to look at the cost of attendance and see how much scholarship they give, which would have been probably financial aid that they would have had to give out anyway, need-based aid. So now what they're finding is that students feel better when they get a nice scholarship at the admissions level, and they matriculate more frequently. If they get this big award, they're accepted and get the award, a scholarship in the admissions letter. So it works better for the school and for the families. It doesn't work as well for people who have a huge financial need.
So let's stop sharing because we're out of time. I did, apparently we answered the questions that were listed in the chat.